Hey everyone, it's Dr. Rick and the Cannabis Coaches. So we're going to talk to you now about the top 5 questions that we're receiving about what to do when you guys receive our product. Matt, why don't you introduce yourself?
Hi, my name is Matt, and I'm a cannabis coach and a pharmacist by trade.
Mike?
And Mike Richards, owner of MBS Fitness and cannabis coach.
Excellent. So we're missing one person. That will be our doctorate. He is on leave because he just had a baby, but Derek G1 is our science director. So we had some questions sent over by patients about what to do or what to expect with the cannabis experience. So we're going to read these out.
So the first question is about the application process. There's a lot of literature or a lot of language when you look at the state website, so it can be a little bit confusing about how to actually go about getting a medical card. So if I could ask our two coaches, how does that process work and where do I start?
Yeah, so I think it's interesting because I'm a medical patient here in Illinois. I got my card probably about 4 years ago, and thankfully the process has gotten a lot easier. So I remember first off, it was very hard to find a doctor that was supportive of cannabis, let alone somebody like Dr. Saguil who can coach and educate people through the process. It was also, a lot of paper applications, and it was, to be quite honest, a pain in the butt to get your card. Now, fast forward 3-4 years, pretty simple process. So we have 52 qualifying conditions. As long as you have one of those conditions, then you would find a doctor like Dr. Saguil that validates that you have one of those. And then, Dr. Rick, you're familiar with the online process. It's pretty easy nowadays, isn't it?
It is, and when Mike had a great point, because I would usually just go ahead and approve, depending on the condition, and the conditions have opened up. It's longer now in the last year, I think, with 4 more or 5 more diagnoses that you're allowed to have to get your medical cannabis card. But I remember when we first started out, it was I would hear people would apply and then not for 3 to 6 months get their card.
Oh, it was horrible. It was horrible. Yeah, and you're correct. I forgot about that. Back in the day, you would fill out the application. You would literally have to wait at certain points, 4 weeks, 5 weeks, and a lot of medical patients, they're suffering while they're waiting for this process. So one of the good things that has come about over the last couple of years here is that they've automated that process a lot more. And if you apply for your medical card within 24 hours, you'll get a temporary card where you can actually go into the dispensary and make a purchase, which cuts down that lead time between, okay, I've made the decision to get my card, I'm suffering, I need my medication, I can actually go to the dispensary the next day.
Right, and so as Mike was alluding to, I applied, I was able to get my doctor to approve me, fibromyalgia as a diagnosis, and I applied online. I did it, I think, either last Friday or the Friday before. One of the nightmares was they never answered the phone. And I tell you what, I called up because I thought, okay, I'm going to have a problem. I've navigated the website before as a fake patient just to show people, I think, on video. Mm-hmm. And it was, there were some speed bumps there. But I just said, okay, since I'm going to do this online, I'm going to get them on and see what happens. I thought that she'd be rushing me, but she was actually taking her time with the state. And I filled out all the data. I uploaded license, utility bill, and then the doctor's 3-page physician certification, and that was it.
That's it.
Well, I applied on a Friday, but I got it on Monday. I was like, oh yes, I got it. And I haven't used it yet, but well, I'm a caregiver, so I have a caregiver card for my patient, but I wanted to go through the process. It is much easier for the MCPP. That's the 1 to 3 year card. You did the OAPP, right?
That's right, yeah. And that was very easy. You just upload a driver's license, you upload some sort of proof of your residence, like a utility bill, and in real time, after all that's uploaded, you receive your medical card electronically and you can print it up right away. So you don't even have to wait 24 hours to get that one. That one happens in real time. It's pretty amazing how as Mike alluded to, things have evolved compared to what it was only 6 months ago or 12 months ago in terms of speed and getting things done.
And just to, sort of for the viewers out there, there's two different tracks that you can go with your medical cannabis card in Illinois today. So you have the medical cannabis program, where that would be a commitment for either a 1-year card, a 2-year card, or a 3-year card. But then we also have the opioid alternative pilot program that Amit was talking about, where this is, an opportunity for people to, I don't want to say try cannabis, but it's a three-month card that you get when you go through that process. It's a little bit cheaper than applying for the regular medical cannabis card, but a lot of the times, talking with patients, that gives them an opportunity, maybe if they're on the fence or if they don't know if cannabis is going to benefit them, they have that 3-month trial period before committing to the 1-year, the 2-year, or the 3-year card.
In talking to patients about the difference between the two, some folks are on a budget, some folks are unsure. So for those folks, I say just try the 3-month card, the OAPP. If there's a diagnosis of chronic pain or benefiting from an opioid, and then see how it goes. It does take some time. Yeah, so this is the dovetail to the OAPP and the trial, is that if you get your card, whether it's from me, and I offer that process too at Herbal411.com, you can click on the link to Medical Cannabis Consult and I can approve you if you fit the criteria. You have to follow the rules in the state. But once that's taken care of and you get your OAPP, I have seen some patients try to do things on their own. There's value in folks who have used medical cannabis in the past, but my baby boomers have only smoked it in the past. And there are just so many different products out there. I mean, almost mirrors all the products available in a pharmacy. Those of you who've been to the pharmacy, you can go down the aisle for days and not know what to get. When I go to the grocery and and my wife says to pick up bread or meat, it's like, okay, I know I'm gonna get stuck here because it's not just one bread, it's like 3 different loaves, 3 different companies, and a whole bunch of other things, and it takes forever, and I can get lost. If you go to a cannabis or a dispensary and you don't know what you're doing, or you only remember having smoked back in the 80s, what looked like a bud, and then you open up the dispensary website and you see the catalog and the menu, it can be daunting.
Yeah.
And I think that's where some patients I've heard, when this first started in Illinois, I had 2 or 3 that went to the dispensary. No offense to the dispensary, but they wound up going to the emergency room because they probably had a little bit of paranoia or a side effect. Nobody went back to the coach to decide or come up with a template or a design. What should we try first? How should we ramp it up? What happens? How do we titrate? So, I mean, it's really important even in blood pressure medicine or cholesterol medicine. You don't go with the biggest thing. You start slow, you see how things go, and then you build up.
And I think that's a good point that you bring up. I mean, it's not the cannabis that people are used to from back in the 80s or back in the 70s, where, if you look at the potency of what is in the dispensaries today, I mean, it's sometimes triple, if not quadruple, the potency levels from what, a lot of times people are used to from their past experiences. So to Dr. Rick's point, obviously cannabis has a little, a more of a safety profile than some of the other things that are out there, but you have to be cautious, you have to be careful, and you do have to work with a coach that can help guide you through that process because, I hear people joke all the time, oh, I took too much cannabis, I got the munchies, and I fell asleep on the couch. But to Dr. Rick's point, if you're new to cannabis, you don't know what it's going to feel like. If you take too big of a dose, especially in an ingestible format, that can be a scary process, and I've heard those horror stories as well. So obviously, you're not going to die from overdosing with cannabis, but the last thing that we would want is for somebody to have a bad experience and to sort of turn them off from the benefits that you can have by using it appropriately through methods like microdosing, through selecting the correct products, through working with people like Dr. Rick and Matt. That's how you get success with cannabis and get, acquainted with this new form of cannabis that's out there for people.
Thus far in the world, there has not been an overdose on medical cannabis. There's probably some addictive issues with that, but compared to, I keep on pointing to you, Amit, about side effects on pharmacy, but...
And age differences and variances, right, with age, in terms of how it would affect a 16-year-old versus a 45-year-old or a 60-year-old? Or...
That's a good point. Yeah. Because as we age, systems slow down. But also, if people are on different medicines.
So I'm so glad you brought that up, because when you look at social media and you look at people who are trying to sell the product or sell the concept, 9 times out of 10 they won't have a discussion or they won't talk about side effects or drug interactions. The fact is, cannabis is metabolized by the liver, and the liver has a series of enzymes that other drugs are also using to metabolize. So cannabis does interact with other drugs, and it's important to know what those drugs are. Unfortunately, the number of drugs are very limited, but just an example, if a client is on a Coumadin, like a blood thinner, we do have to be mindful about the interaction between cannabis and Coumadin, and we would encourage them to continue to work with their physician to monitor their Coumadin and blood INR levels.
Right.
And then some other rare ones are certain antifungal medications, tuberculosis medications could interact with cannabis, and some long-acting anti-seizure medications. I know we hear a lot of information about CBD in terms of its support on certain types of epilepsies, but if they're already on a long-acting anti-seizure medications, we do have to do a little bit of research on that as well.
So Matt, the idea about just taking it to a practical level, not medical cannabis, but prescription medicines. I know when I have to get a prescription medicine for anybody in the family, there's this long list of side effects that you have to sign off, or the pharmacist usually says, do you have any questions? And then I think we're supposed to sign a form or something. And if we do have questions, pharmacist is supposed to give guidance, right?
So it is the state law, but if anybody has walked into a big chain, big box pharmacy and you get your medicine, you'll notice that everybody who's working behind the counter is flustered and frazzled and behind and just trying to catch up. So it can be a little intimidating to ask questions because you can tell just by their face that they don't have time. So it's, again, another reason why maybe getting a little extra support and understanding that concept with the help of coaches could be a way to address that. But by law in Illinois, a pharmacist is supposed to counsel you when you receive a new prescription, and they're supposed to ask you if you have any questions.
And that's cool that we have the option with regular medicine and a pharmacist to get a little bit of education. But we don't have that with dispensaries in Illinois.
Correct.
Right?
Yeah. So there are certain states like New York and Pennsylvania where they actually require a pharmacist to be on site and consulting people and answering those questions that we had talked about. Now in Illinois, that's not the case. So we have patient care reps, we have bud tenders, and they do go through a training process. A lot of times, it's an internal training that the companies put them through. Also, the state requires responsible vendor training. So this is a state mandated training that, employees go through. But just from personal experience and being a patient care rep back, when I first started in the industry, that's beyond our scope of practice to get into those conversations about medical interaction with cannabis. So we can talk about, the different products, the different administration methods, how they're going to help for different symptoms. But if somebody were to come into the dispensary and ask the question, I'm on Coumadin, when should I take my CBD or when should I take my tincture? That's beyond the scope. That's why, it's essential for people like Dr. Rick and Matt to be involved in, starting up a cannabis regimen, especially for somebody that's new, especially if you're somebody that does have a lot of, pre-existing conditions that you're working with and medications that you're on. Illinois, we don't have that pharmacist component like other states, which in my mind, it's even more important to align yourselves with good doctors and good pharmacists to answer these questions appropriately for you.
Good coaches.
Good coaches.
Coumadin is a common one, everybody knows it, because if you flub or have a problem with the cytochrome P450, the system in the liver, it's one of the systems that breaks down toxins, and it also breaks down medicines. But that Coumadin is one thing. You don't have to be on Coumadin. A lot of things go through the cytochrome P450 system. So there's a long list. If you put cytochrome P450 on Google and medicines, you will see this long list of different things that seem spooky because a lot of those things could be
blood pressure medications,
okay, right.
Antibiotics, very common drugs that people use all the time are metabolized by the liver.
So how are we supposed to, you answer the questions when it comes to prescriptions. New York, the pharmacist answers the question when it comes to prescription interactions in cannabis, medical cannabis. Is there legislation that says that the dispensaries are going to have pharmacists or somebody of that?
No, that's, there's a lot of, things that they're pushing for as far as like easier access for people and different limits for people, but, having that component of a pharmacist in a dispensary is not something that we're going to see in Illinois.
So essentially our patients are on their own in the state of Illinois. And so with you being on your own, you do have to do some due diligence as far as research, understanding. I always liken it to learning how to cook. I mean, you're going to burn some dishes, and if the dishes causes you to be on the couch in the morning, that's fine. But if the burning of dishes causes you to go to the emergency room, I mean, with the deductibles nowadays, that could be $3,000. So it would behoove any of our viewers to learn first.
Some of you out there might have been to a dispensary before, others out there might not have been to a dispensary. Each dispensary is different as far as the experience that you're going to get, the decor, how you interact with the patient care reps or the bud tenders. And it could be a little bit of an overwhelming process for people that are new to it. Like Dr. Rick had alluded to, I mean, if you look at that menu, sometimes it's like the Cheesecake Factory where you have 50 different options, 60 different options. And I don't know about you guys, but I get anxious when I go to the Cheesecake Factory because I don't know what to order, picking this, picking that. The good thing is that nowadays, a lot of the information as far as the products that are available online. So the dispensaries, you could go to their website or you could go to, the sites that they use, and you could actually see that menu that's on there. And I think that's important, is to familiarize yourself with the products and what you're looking for. And to Dr. Rick's example, it's like going to the grocery store and not having a grocery list. If you go into the dispensary and you don't know what you're looking for, right? You're going to be, okay, did I need bread? Did I need milk? Did I need this? Whereas if you take a moment and you go online, potentially working with a coach or somebody, and they talk you through the different products and how to sort of view that menu, in my mind, I mean, that whole menu could be broken down into administration methods. So what I mean by that is generally with cannabis, there's many different ways that you could administer it, but if you break that down into 3 different categories, so inhalation, ingestion, and then topical use. So if you have 60 or 70 different products on a menu, you could start going one by one. Okay, do I ingest this? Do I inhale this? Do I apply this topically? And taking a step back and having a plan of what you're looking for before you start selecting the products is going to be even more beneficial for the dispensary experience, because when you get there, you're not floundering. It's not like, okay, what do I need for my groceries this week? You know what you want, and then when you work with those patient care reps and the people that are in the dispensaries, they could help you fine tune with questions about products or the different cultivators. But really having a game plan before you go in there is the most important thing.
So it sounds like getting coaching prior for me to visit the dispensary would be a cost-saving exercise.
Oh, absolutely.
Is that right?
Yeah,
Right. Yeah. Less burned dishes, probably. You mentioned in the big chain pharmacies that they're flustered, or they're probably very pressured to fill prescriptions all the time. I honestly don't notice it because I'm just at the window.
I'll just peek in.
Take a look in the back.
You'll see a lot of non-smiling faces.
My experience is that when I've gone to several different dispensaries, recreational and medical in Illinois, and never noticed it, but I tell you, I'm more anxious because when I first went in, if I wasn't sure what to get from my patient, and there's a long line, and there's people behind you, and then it's almost like confessional. You see the person go to the front, and he's talking to somebody, and I'm trying to listen in. What do I order? And then they leave, and then I'm there. Okay, I'll have product number A. I don't have it. Oh, great. So then then there's people behind me. Then there's the salesperson, also known as the bud tender. And I have to look through the entire menu, and it's like, oh, geez, I don't know what to get. Give me this one. And then sometimes, 50% of the time when I would do that without doing the research, I probably, in fact, I had the whole bag of stuff I didn't use at home because I did not like the effect. So there is, as you mentioned, you're not allowed to go into that scope of education at the sales counter in the dispensary?
Yeah, so they could talk to you about symptoms, and they could recommend products that are going to help with different symptoms, and they could talk about, how this product is different from cultivator versus cultivator. But a good point that we brought up is that, Illinois has gone adult use, and prior to that, in just a medical environment, just to be quite honest, there weren't as many people that were coming to the dispensary. So at that point, it was a little bit easier to have these longer conversations, whereas nowadays, just because of the sheer volume, there's not as much of an opportunity, so the more prepared that you could be going into that dispensary with your hit list, right? So what are my 3 questions? What are my 4 questions? What do I know that I'm looking for? So I'm looking for something that I could inhale. Do I want to get that in a flower format? Do I want to get that in a vape format? Do I need a little bit more bang for my buck and I want to go the concentrate route? So, it's not like you have to know exactly what you're going to get, but having that roadmap and having that plan in your head and knowing the 2 or 3 questions that are most important to you are going to actually help optimize that dispensary experience because of this climate that we have in Illinois where we have adult use. Now, it's not a bad thing because, it's easier for people to access cannabis, right? So it's good that we have, more legislation and more legalization going on, but at the same time, it's even more important to have your team or to have your coaches and to self-educate, because at the end of the day, you're gonna know what works for you better than anybody else, better than that bud tender, better than that patient care rep, and especially with some of the strategies that we talk about as far as incorporating mindfulness, microdosing, paying attention to how one administration helps alleviate your pain or your nausea before you take a second one, it can make the difference at the end of the day. And really, in my mind, the most amount of benefit for the least amount of cannabis is going to be good for the patient, and it's also going to be good for the wallet.
I'm not sure that all the people watching understand the difference between adult use and medical cannabis, but adult use is also called rec, or recreational cannabis, recreational and then medical. So rec, there are some dispensaries that are just simply recreational. Sunnyside, one of my experiences was Sunnyside in Schaumburg. I just wanted to test them out because we were at the mall, right outside the mall, which is weird. There were like 10 lanes with people and servers or bud tenders, and that's rec. But there are some places that are just medical.
I believe there might be just a handful, but that, those are few and far between, the dispensaries that are out there that are just medical. And to be quite honest, if they are just medical, they're trying to be both medical and adult use.
Okay, and then there's between, which is medical and adult use. So how does it work in California? Do they have the same divisions, rec, both, and then medical?
Yeah. Same sort of thing, but out west, with the industry that's a little bit more progressed, it's a little bit different because, there's ample supply of product. In the medical, it's there for people, but, cannabis is a little bit more normalized in that environment where, whether you're going in for medical or recreational, you're getting the same products. A lot of them are the same, depending what side you're on. And, in that more mature market, you don't see that differentiation as much as we have here in Illinois right now.
That would be my dispensary experience, is I have to do, but it forced me to do my homework and my reading beforehand, and then ask you about how this plant works, because there's so many different things. What is combination therapy? Whether it's the middle age to older age with high blood pressure, cholesterol, diabetes medicine, hormones, or the younger ages with ADD, ADHD, depression, anxiety, so more mood. I think, or the younger kids with antibiotics. So I think across the average lifespan or a family household, there's going to be different ages and different medical problems and probably different medicines. So I have a couple of warriors that don't take medicines anymore because they've made proper changes in lifestyle. But when we have people that try to use their medicines and then they put a layer of cannabis on. It's cool if you microdose, but you can't really microdose on your own. They're prescriptions. So what would be the strategy?
Yeah, well,
Combination therapy.
Yeah, well, when I think of combination therapy, just from my background in health and wellness, what comes to my mind is incorporating cannabis with exercise, incorporating it with nutrition, and incorporating it with aromatherapy type methods. So I know that Matt can talk a little bit more about, the traditional allopathic combination therapies, but I really see there being a big benefit with the combination therapy of cannabis with health and wellness. And that's something that I don't think is recognized enough with where we are in the industry in Illinois. Like, perfect example, I've been out to California and Colorado, and that's just what they do. Like, you walk into a store, there's, ratios of CBD to THC, there's a health and wellness feel. Like, people are going in to get their topical creams before they go to the gym to get their workout, because post-workout recovery, they need to put that cream on. I think that's something that hasn't made its way to the Midwest, and that's something that I'm most excited about working together on, is this philosophy of combination therapy with health and wellness.
When we can get to that desired dose of medical cannabis, whether it's inhaled versions of smoke vape or edible versions of tincture gummy, brownie, or topical versions, once you get to that dose and life is better, whatever you're suffering from, even if it's just sleep, if sleep is better, then the next question is getting off the Ambien. Do you ever get questions like that in the pharmacy? Not regarding medical cannabis, but can I decrease dose? What do I have to do to decrease my dose? High blood pressure medicine?
We can give them a whole host of suggestions with the asterisk at the end saying, make sure you work with your licensed physician or nurse practitioner or whoever. But as long as we do that, I can certainly give them a whole host of concepts and ideas, as long as they share that information with their physician. Mm-hmm. So if we're talking about blood pressure, we may look at vitamin D levels, we may look at magnesium, we may look at CoQ10, and who knows, if maybe medical cannabis, if the blood pressure is stress related, then the medical cannabis could be another tool that we could use while we work on our mindfulness practice, or while we make adjustments to our diet, or while we avoid foods that we're sensitive to that might make us more nervous or jittery, or while we transcend and become more enlightened. Whatever the process is, whatever wavelength we're on, we can use these tools along that path.
And I think, to point out one thing, that's, and not to toot your horn too much, Dr. Rick, but that's one thing that I love that you do different, is that, because back when I first got my medical cannabis certification, granted, there was a lot more taboos, but I went to one of those pot docs that just did this. They literally just closed their eyes and signed off. So, like, for me to go back to that person and to be like, okay, I just started this cannabis regimen, what do I do with this medication or that medication? That opportunity was not there. So
that was kind of the question I had, is so what would be the difference if I just went to one of those pot docs versus getting a more in-depth integrative consultation with, say, Dr. Rick? How would that be different?
Yeah, well, for my answer, just the follow-up and having a shepherd and a support through, I don't want to say the trial and error process, but, cannabis isn't like other therapies where, okay, this is a starting point. You take 5 milligrams BID twice a day for the next 30 days, and then you come back and then we talk. That's not really how cannabis works. It's a natural plant. There's terpenes, there's over 100 different cannabinoids in the plant. So, having a doctor that actually follows up and has those conversations with not only is how the cannabis is affecting you, but how is that affecting everything else that we're doing, and is there opportunity to change anything else that we're doing, is such a powerful relationship. And I think that relationship is not even identified, because so many people, I think, have had that experience that I've had with the pot doctor. I just sign off. They don't even know that people like Dr. Rick are out there.
I know a handful of other doctors that are certifying, but the cliff ends there. They certify, and then I push them gently about their knowledge base or their training, and there is none, or there's no after visit education. I at least try to upload my videos on common questions to my YouTube channel, but if you don't have an idea about where to get the education and you don't have somebody like our group, then where can they get information from?
Well, the almighty powerful Google, but at the end of the day, you know how Google works. Is it whoever has the best AdWords and analytics that is fueling that search that you get? So I mean, it's in my opinion, it's hard to find the credible information out there. There's a plethora of different information. Just Google cannabis. You'll be all day just reading different articles, but is it something that is beneficial for you? And is it something that's going to work for your lifestyle is where I think the hands-on approach that somebody who knows you, somebody who knows your medical history, somebody who's experienced with cannabis, Dr. Rick, how many patients have you experienced that journey through their cannabis cycle? Not a lot of doctors can say that, and learning from that firsthand experience and seeing the pitfalls, I think is more powerful than anything that Google can tell somebody or anything that they could search on their own.
And there's intention too. I feel like when his patients see him, and I don't want to get too ethereal here, but it's not just advice or prescribing. Sometimes there's intention there that you will get better, and then sort of over time it happens.
That makes a difference. There is a Harvard study that showed 70% of the time when you go to see a doctor, if they're just listening in, then that the DNA already changes, or the posture changes, or the outlook changes for the patient. Mm-hmm. So I really think that there's value. Like if you go to a pharmacy and you're really pressured, if I see pressure at the window, I'll be pressured. I have to admit that when I have a out of control anxious patient coming in, I have to ground myself before I walk into the room, otherwise I'll start talking fast too. When there's a stress response at the window, there'll be a stress response with the customer. And if we all are living in that kind of, nothing gets done. So I have to calm beforehand. I have to use the mindful practice that you talked about earlier. And we all do that, and we wanted to, and since we share that, we wanted to be able to provide that to clients and patients in addition to the medical cannabis experience. I think that the plant is just so intelligent. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's one plant that you can divide into the standard CBD, THC, or sativa, indica, hybrid, or terpenes down below now. And it's just, and you can extract different things to dial up the terpenes, dial down the terpenes. I've actually heard you can take a sativa plant, depending on the terpenes, and turn it into an indica response, which is really cool. So those of you who kind of know what you're doing with regards to sativa indica, and then you just kind of mixed and matched the colors, you might need more information than that. So I think that the combination therapy, whether it's going to be getting off of prescription medicines or at least controlling your symptoms and then asking the next step to possibly dial down the prescription medicines, or in my case, my suggestion is always, let's control suffering. Once the suffering is under control with microdosing to save money and also to decrease the chances for side effects, then we, without changing any other variables, get to the prescription side and maybe lower a little bit and see what happens. That's where I have to work with my pharmacists. I always just go to Amit and say, hey, what do I do with this compounding stuff? How much do we put in? And we have this computer right over here that just tells us how to shortcut that. But that's why we offer what we do to patients and clients.
Yeah.
So combination therapy, even to the point of if you're, say, going to an orthopedic surgeon to have an injection, have knee replacement, or just as a second opinion for pain control, I think we can do a lot with regards to giving our suggestions and maybe making things work even better.
Well, for anyone who's had a steroid injection, you get your steroid injection, the injection works, and then after a certain number of weeks, and you know better than I do, after a certain number of weeks it wears off, and then you have to go back and get another injection. So what do we do in between? What do we do to delay the frequency of the number of injections? Can we incorporate medical cannabis into that process so that the number of visits can get slightly less and that we still get the pain relief in between our doctor visits? Probably, using different things to reduce the dose of everything.
Right. And it doesn't have to be orthopedic. It can be bowel related, it can be asthma related, it can be psychological or behavioral health related. This plant has so much to offer, whether it's medical cannabis, which is, I think, a higher grade than hemp. I've seen some folks want hemp for their CBD, and I have no problems with that as long as it has that CSA, a certificate of analysis. I just love the quality that we can get in the dispensaries in Illinois.
Mm-hmm. Plus also, I mean, the entourage effect. So, I've read research papers out there saying that, a little bit of THC in conjunction with that CBD is going to have more efficacy than just the CBD alone. So I think that's the other difference, that you get out of the CBD that you get from the dispensaries, is that you have that opportunity to take advantage of the full plant benefits through trace amounts of these other cannabinoids that sometimes you wouldn't find with the hemp products that we get over the counter. Next question that we get a lot is cannabis speed bumps. So one of the speed bumps that I sometimes see with cannabis is that people think that it's going to work immediately. So especially with CBD, and a story that I usually share with people is I remember when I was working in the dispensaries, a patient came in and they, CBD is such a popular topic now. They were like, what can I get? What can I get? We set them up with a tincture, and the next day they came back and they say, this didn't work. So I'm thinking to myself, it's a day later. Did the CBD really have an opportunity to work? And I think that's one of the speed bumps, that people think it's going to be an immediate effect. Now, Matt, when you had your pharmacy and people were getting CBD, it wasn't an overnight thing where they would get the results, correct?
CBD is a drug, and just like other drugs, they're not necessarily going to work the next day because they have to get it assimilated into the body, what we call steady state. And depending on our genetics and how we metabolize things, it may take 7 days to kick in. It may take 14 days to kick in. For folks who have severe back pain, some people will get benefit within a day, but others may not get benefit until 2 weeks. And if we don't have the patience to continue taking that item in a regimented manner over a course of 2 weeks, we may think it's not working, but it is going to work if we continue. So we can't just give up on it right away. And that's why taking it one day and then thinking it's not working the next day is really not the right path.
And Dr. Rick, what do you recommend usually? Twice a day, right? I've heard you say before.
The easiest thing I can come up with is most of the edible forms, and I have a preference to tinctures, but the edible forms, 6 to 12 hours of half-life before it's totally disintegrated. And so that's why I say 2 times a day to develop a loading dose, and and everybody's different. So it could be dependent, especially if you're using tincture, on digestion, IBS, other medicines that you have. If you're taking H2 blockers like Tagamet, Pepcid, Zantac, I wonder if that have an effect on it. But there's so many variables. But I think that the easy thing is to remember just regularity and ritual. Now, if you're dealing with anxiety, and that's all you have, which I really think people have more than just that, and nowadays with COVID, everybody seems to have a little touch of anxiety, then fine, you can just use something at night, and then your sleep is good and your anxiousness is decreased. But I don't know an anxious person that doesn't have little triggers throughout the day, especially with the election.
Or what could happen after the election?
Or after the election, right? So we'll have to see about that, knock on wood. But yes, it does take loading up, getting up to a good steady state, as Amit said, in the blood level of, I like CBD. I think THC don't necessarily have to get to steady state. I think THC, personally, THC, I try to limit and just keep on at night. I don't like the high effect, especially when I have a lot of things to do. That's what makes it challenging. That's a speed bump for me, is that when I tell somebody with inflammation that's on an anti-inflammatory, whether it's prescription or over the counter, I say that you have to get used to taking Advil twice a day, Advil 3 times a day, Aleve twice a day. Build it up. If it doesn't work in 2 weeks, maybe we'll go even higher. Same thing with the CBD. I say go twice a day. And honestly, for inflammation relief and pain and suffering, to go nice and slow, I honestly say 4 weeks. Give me a message back and tell me how you're doing. And then I say, okay, for night now, if you made it past the 4 weeks, maybe sooner if they have a lot of suffering, then you can add a second component or a second product to maybe help with sleep and pain, like a THC product, heavy. I've always wondered if you can add a terpene on the side. You have your medical cannabis product, but then you put in like an essential oil that's high in linalool or lavender, if it would work in conjunction? I don't know what you think about that.
Oh, huge supporter of that concept for sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And that goes back to our combination therapy. I mean, I think, that might be a topic for another video, is little things like this is, combining, for example, terpenes, like Dr. Rick mentioned. I mean, those are predominant in cannabis. So is it possible to find a cannabis strain that has a similar terpene to a nutrient that you're eating? So like a good example, myrcene. That's a terpene that's commonly found in cannabis strains, a little bit more predominant in the indica strains, but we also find that in mangoes. So, what pops into my head is, to optimize the benefit that we get if we combined an indica strain that's high in myrcene with a mango that we eat for a snack, is that going to optimize the results that we get from cannabis? And that's a whole nother video for us.
That probably is. Yeah. Don't go start buying bushels of mango. I mean, it will work indirectly, but you'll have an upset stomach from all the mango, or all the lavender, or all the pine, so that's the beauty of combination therapy. That's where we can help you, at least in the education process or the coaching process. So, any speed bumps that you anticipate?
It's going to be challenging to find the right guidance, which is why we're having this conversation now, is to make the guidance more widely accessible and available. That's the only roadblock that I see.
One of the things that I have seen is that when people get dialed in on their medical cannabis products at microdose levels, they'll sometimes have their medicines, and they lose weight perhaps, or their bowels work better. They'll sometimes have their medicines work a little bit too robustly. So the blood, if they're relaxed, they're getting good sleep, then suddenly the blood pressure medicine might be getting them dizzy because it's too strong, which is a really good side effect if it's a signal that life is changing, or sleep is improving, or anxiety is decreased. So this is where I think the last question, number 5, would be helpful, and that's out there aside from do you know any other companies or groups of healers that do what we do? I know.
Not as well as we do.
There's other groups in other states, but not in the Midwest.
Unfortunately, but listen, we can go international. We can go the U.S. nationwide. In fact, you can reach out to me, and I can just give my partners the question too on my Herbal411 website. But I think there's great utility in the health and wellness industry. Mike, you're a typical example of how you microdose. You mentioned earlier microdosing and then waking up, or microdosing and then going to the gym. Mm-hmm. Could you give folks an example?
Absolutely. So, me personally, with my regimen, I follow Dr. Rick, what he talked about, CBD twice a day. But, I've also toyed around with, small amounts of THC in conjunction with caffeine before a workout. So this is something I got introduced when I was in Colorado because, they're a little bit more progressed with the products that they have out there. And I noticed that there was a company that was selling these capsules that they made, and they would infuse them with botanicals as well, so like different terpenes. But one that really stuck with me was this one. It was 2.5 milligrams of THC, 2.5 milligrams of CBD, and then I think it was like 20 milligrams or 25 milligrams of caffeine. So when they were talking to me about this, they were raving, that people, use this for health and wellness before they go to the gym. I did have an opportunity to try that, and that's, something that's very powerful. And I think, utilizing small amounts of cannabis with other options that are out there, like caffeine or things like that, or the mixture that we have, is a way to sort of start down that path of combining cannabis with the health and wellness mindset.
This is where I see great utility. I think that we can add that. And going back to the dispensary experience, and when you get to the front desk and you get to the bud tender, you put your cash down, I want this, and it's not there. I take my cash back, and either I go whimper off or I take an hour to kind of figure through. Sometimes I find the dispensaries run out of product, and that's how we created Mix2UR. Mix2UR is, I've done a video with Amit. Could you explain what Mix2UR is?
So Mix2UR is a base that we designed using scientific reasoning and thought, and how well we can create a base that will help THC or CBD get absorbed into the body topically. So if we are not looking to get that funny feeling as much, but we still want to get the benefit of the cannabinoids, can we create a base that will help us to deliver the THC in a different form, incorporate it into a base, and then rub it into the area where it's desired or needed the most. And after a lot of due diligence and months of research, we put together a highly systematic formula that incorporates DMSO, which is an ingredient that does two things. One, it helps push the active ingredient into the skin faster, and it has some mild anti-inflammatory benefits as well. So now this is a vehicle that we can use to have an oral version of THC incorporated into a base, and now we have a topical version.
And to your point, Dr. Rick, in the dispensaries, the RSO oil and tinctures are something that are a common product for ingestion. But combining that with the suspension method that we have in the Mix2UR is a way to take what we would normally ingest and apply topically for the same benefit, if not more, because it's a different delivery system. So RSO is a typical product that's available at a lot of the dispensaries. And also there are a few topicals that are available, but from what I've seen, the topicals of the dispensary are coconut oil based or MCT oil based. So Matt, how is that different than what we have in this Mix2UR as far as efficacy and absorption?
We really wanted to make sure that whatever active ingredient that we incorporated into this base would get assimilated into the skin, into the dermal layer as fast as possible. And that's really what differentiates this product from what we would normally find just on any shelf. And that is where we feel that we can get the most benefit within, for most people, in just a few minutes.
So in my case, where I got to the front desk and the front desk didn't have, or the dispensary didn't have my product, this would give more options, because the more available products, like what Mike said as far as RSO oil, Rick Simpson oil, that's usually robustly available all the time.
Yeah.
So if you have that's available all the time, and then the topicals that are not available all the time, that's where we step in. Mm-hmm. You can use the product, and then, as you mentioned, Amit, mix it in. And I'll put links to our video that we did previously, and then hopefully have the medicine part of the plant and the available RSO in our topical portion. And we have nasal and then toothpaste coming too, but and still have the persistent and sustainable available product for you guys. And then they can probably dial in or dial up or down or titrate how much product they get from the dispensary, mm-hmm. whether it's 1-to-1 or heavy RSO or just tincture with CBD to extend, right, Amit?
There is experimentation in terms of finding the right amount of the product that's going to work for you, but as long as we have a base, we can do that comfortably and not have to feel some of the systemic side effects, and be okay with some tweaking here and there, or dialing in, as Dr. Rick likes to term it.
We'll be having our product available online soon. We have to go through a couple of trials and errors, and then make sure it's safe, which it is at this point in time.
Yes.
We know that the dispensary products are safe when we combine both together. Again, safety is the biggest thing. Availability and sustainability is the second biggest thing. And then you guys getting rid of your suffering and reversing disease and getting to a better lifespan will be the last thing. So we really have your best interest.
Generally, we probably provide it in about a 25 gram type of a container. And for that 25 grams, we're talking about maybe 25 or $30, and that's it. And something like this could last a very long time depending on how frequently or how many parts of the body we need to use it on. But for $25 or $30, we now have this flexibility where even if somebody's out of something, we have this sort of version where we can use it at home.
Right. So it's always been for patients. Any words of wisdom before we sign off, Mike?
No, I would say, like we always talk about, cannabis isn't for everybody, but for those of you out there that aren't getting the results that you're looking for with traditional methods that you've tried, that's what we're here for, is to help support, to coach you through that process, and to help break down some of the stigmas that still might be associated with cannabis. It's not just rolling joints, it's not just smoking weed. It's really how we can use this product and what we have available for us, working in conjunction with the right team to get the results that you're looking for and live the life that you want to lead. And that's what we're all passionate about, and that's what we're going to keep doing with these videos and different series and education that we put out.
Any final closing thoughts, Amit?
Just beauty within and less drugs is really what comes to mind. Is we're just constantly trying to create a better space inside, and as a byproduct, if we can use less drugs, then it's always a win-win.
And I'll say to close up that we will have future podcasts together depending on what you guys have questions about. So put them in the comments down below, and don't forget to subscribe and hit the alert button to find out when we do new videos. And we'll create more products depending on what is in demand. And if you have our product, please could you put your comments down below about your experiences. My personal experience was when I used the RSO oil from Mag Landrace and I combined it in my product. I did have to titrate how much I was using on my back. I think I did a video on deadlifts and I had pain the next day. So I applied it. And I used a little bit too much the first night. It made me a little bit slow in the morning, which is I don't like that. So I decreased the dose. Perfect. So everybody's a little different, and we're here for that. If you're not sure what to do, but we'll be releasing our release date will probably be before Thanksgiving. We just have a couple of other speed bumps that we have to address. Otherwise, we're here for you. So thank you for watching up until this point. Hopefully next time, our Director of Education and Research, Derek Giwan, will also be here. Otherwise, we'll see you at the next video.